Welcome to Big City, Small Town, the weekly podcast all about San Antonio and the people who make it go and grow. I'm your host, Bob Rivard. This week's guest is Meredith Walker, Executive Director of the Texas Business Hall of Fame, a position she has held for nearly 7 years. The Texas Business Hall of Fame was founded in 1982 to celebrate the state's most successful and community-minded business leaders. Bottom line success is not enough for someone to gain entry. Philanthropy, giving back, and community engagement are essential factors in each year's class of inductees. Why are we doing this episode now? Well, given these measures, it should come as no surprise to listeners that the Admiral, NBA Hall of Famer, and legendary San Antonio Spur David Robinson, turned business leader, will be among the small group of inductees at the organization's annual gala next week in Dallas. Meredith Walker, welcome to Big City, Small Town.
Thanks for having me.
I'm going to do my best to talk about inductees from cities other than San Antonio today, but given the number of celebrated business leaders here who are in the Texas Business Hall of Fame, that's going to be hard for me.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So you'll have to intersperse some non-San Antonians with some of the names I bring up. And we'll get to David Robinson and other local luminaries that have already been inducted in just a minute, but first let's tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and the path that took you to your current work.
Okay. Well, my start was in politics. And
Where?
In international relations in Washington, D.C.
Okay.
And, I came back to Texas to work for a former statesman. I was head of development at the Baker Institute for Secretary of State James
that's
Baker.
Not just any statesman.
Yes, an amazing statesman. And that was sort of, it's interesting. Most people don't aspire to be in the think tank space, but that was sort of my dream, to work in the think tank space. So I raised money for his think tank at Rice University. I got to go all over the world with him for that, which was super exciting and fun. Then I took an interesting leap to some other nonprofits, all of them think tank based. And someone approached me with the opportunity to work for the Texas Business Hall of Fame. And I thought, wow, that's very outside my comfort zone. But it's like working with individual think tanks on a daily basis, the smartest people in the world, curious, generous spirits. And so, I took a leap and I haven't looked back, and I have a super fun job.
I agree. I think you have a really interesting job, and I think your organization, for all of its power and influence, is widely unknown among, I think, probably our listeners and many other people that are otherwise quite informed about Texas. And so we want to talk more about that. But I can't let your reference to James Baker go without diverting the conversation there a little bit, because he was truly one of the great statesmen of our time in Washington and around the world. And I think now with the death of Henry Kissinger last year, he's probably the oldest Secretary of State still around, and he must be in his 90s, mid-90s?
Yeah, early 90s.
Wow.
And I actually got to meet Henry Kissinger twice working for him. And whenever Henry Kissinger and James Baker were together, Kissinger loved to tell the story about firing him. And that was always an awkward moment. But yeah, I think they remained good friends for all of Kissinger's life. But
well, that's a great background.
Yeah.
And and that work was in Houston at Rice University, distinguished university. And you live in Houston. Has the Texas Business Hall of Fame always been Houston-based, or is it not technically in the city?
Oddly, it was, I think when it was established, it was formally in Houston, but the people who were really instrumental in founding it were also in Dallas. So it was sort of a joint endeavor. I don't know why it was founded by a magazine initially that wanted to kind of find an annual event to generate readership and but
revenue.
Also promote business leaders. And it wasn't hugely successful, although Walter Cronkite was our first MC, which is really cool. We actually found footage of the first event, and most of the people we inducted that year were dead. But were people that were instrumental to the Texas business landscape. But people loved it, and they loved the focus of the honor on not just the transformational business leader, but the business leader who embraced their success as a responsibility to their community, because that's a completely different kind of leader. And after a couple years, the magazine was in trouble. The oil crash happened. It was the mid-1980s. And a guy named Rob Mosbacher.
Well, that's a familiar name.
Yeah, who many have heard of. He and two women out of Dallas agreed to personally bankroll one final attempt at this event because the magazine pulled out.
What was the magazine, Meredith?
I think it was called Texas Entrepreneur. I should know this.
And it's come and gone?
Yes. Oh, it's come and gone. It was only around for a couple years. But the event had taken on a life of its own. And people had become sort of enamored with the whole idea. And that was the most successful year the organization had ever had. That was when we decided to start funding entrepreneurs through funds generated through that event. And from that moment on, it just kind of...
And what year was that?
That was 1984.
84. You had an unusually large class of inductees that year. I was going through the various years, and it varies. It's never the same. Sometimes you have 3 or 4, and sometimes you have more. How do you arrive at that?
Well, now we have a standard of about 5 or 6. But for a while, the selection process has evolved over the years as the organization grew, as it got more competitive for induction. At the beginning, it was determined by a committee. It was very inward-looking, sort of a very elite group of business leaders on our board, determining basically who got in every year. Now, we get close to anywhere between 70 to 100 nominations every year. A committee does decide a ballot of 20, but the only people who get to decide the 6 we induct are living Hall of Fame members. There's 112 living members in the state right now, and they vote. The majority of them vote on our ballot, and they determine who our 6 recipients are, which makes the award pretty meaningful because of that.
Wow, that must open up individual members to intense lobbying. I assume there are people out there that desperately want to say that they're members of the Texas Business Hall of Fame that aren't in fact in there yet.
That's true. And, we have oftentimes the intense lobbyers are PR firms who we don't allow to be involved in our nomination and review process. And we don't accept self-nominations. So, there are quite a few people who want to be in it, which is, very honoring to our organization, very flattering. And it's always interesting to see these nominations come in of these people who have had crazy impact on Texas business that you've never heard of. And, I didn't know the founder of Roku TV was a Texan. I didn't know, things like that.
Either. Who is that?
It's a guy out of Austin. He just came up on our radar. I'm trying to remember his name.
But, so he's not in the Business Hall of Fame
No, but it's just crazy to think about, our first African-American inductee, Comer Cottrell. He was the founder of Jerry Curl. Who knew that started in Texas? He was also the first Black minority owner of a Major League Baseball team. Like, people don't know Mary Kay was a Texan. Sort of, she pioneered a whole new avenue for women in makeup and
pink Cadillacs.
Yeah, and pink Cadillacs. But people don't realize all she did for women too, and all she did for the community and how she changed the game. And that's what we pride ourselves on, is we fund trailblazers, people who really created new opportunities, not just for their business, but for their whole sector of business. They made other businesses possible. And that's probably the best way to kind of distinguish who probably gets serious support and who were just, that's what kind of separates the transformational business leader versus, the highly respected business leader.
That totally defines our oldest living San Antonian that's in the Texas Business Hall of Fame, our one and only woman member, and that's Rosemary Kowalski, who just celebrated her 100th birthday.
Oh, for sure.
Still going strong.
Yeah.
Still appearing in public.
Yeah.
And it's hard to find a woman of, say, the baby boom generation or younger who is a business leader in San Antonio who wasn't profoundly inspired by Rosemary and her sort of hemisphere era business leadership, when very, very few women occupied positions of influence in the business community, but she was a pioneer.
Yeah, Rosemary's a terrific example, and how much she has used her influence and success to help the San Antonio community and beyond. And her company has become really a model for catering companies all over the country. It's not just catering, it's event space, it's, it's floral, it's industrial, event design. Our K Group has basically become a model for growth for so many event management companies around the United States.
So Rosemary was inducted in 2004.
Yes.
If I recall correctly, that's 20 years ago.
Well, before my time.
Before your time. But let's talk about the current class of inductees, because they'll be celebrated next week at the gala in Dallas, and that includes David Robinson. And some people who are only Spurs fans and don't know about David's life and work after the Spurs might wonder, well, why is a Hall of Fame athlete getting into the Texas Business Hall of Fame?
Yeah, no, David's a really interesting story. He's only our second professional athlete. The first was Roger Staubach, the former Dallas Cowboys
who had a big
quarterback
real estate career in Dallas.
Yeah,
afterwards.
He is, I think, still till this day, the wealthiest post-NFL football player. But he also did a ton with his wealth to help others. And he and David are both graduates of the Naval Academy.
That's right.
And he'll be introducing him at the event this year. But, David used his the influence and wealth he gained as a professional athlete.
And brain power. He's a smart guy.
Oh, crazy smart. To not only improve the San Antonio community, to establish Carver Academy, but he also founded the Admiral Group, which, private equity group that hotels, buildings, you name it. I mean, he's hugely successful, that made investments in companies that had both social and economic impact. That was very important to him. He also established the Admiral Center, which helps other professional athletes with their philanthropy. And I love that, right? He set a real tone and example for the professional athlete and their responsibility to their community as an example, and as an example to others. And we're super excited to honor him in Dallas. We it was controversial not to do, because we rotate cities, San Antonio, Houston, Dallas. But we love that we're recognizing him on a statewide stage. He's gets recognized in San Antonio quite a bit, so it's super fun to
When was the last time you were in San Antonio for the event?
Last year.
Last year, and that's when Kit Goldsberry got in from developer of the Pearl and Silver Ventures, so much more.
Who's put San Antonio on the map. There's 2 true 5-star hotels in Texas. One's in Houston, one's Hotel Emma.
What's the one in Houston?
The Post Oak. It's owned by Tillman Fertitta, who is also a Hall of Fame member. For a long time, Tillman was our youngest Hall of Fame inductee.
Well, and he has the, if I'm not mistaken, he's the power behind Landry's, right?
He is. He's also owner of the Houston Rockets.
Right. And he has the restaurant atop the Tower of Americas, in case you haven't been up there for your 10th birthday
I just learned
hamburger.
that, yeah.
Yeah, that's and I think he has one on the Riverwalk, doesn't he? Or if he didn't, he used to. I'm not a big Riverwalk restaurant goer, so I don't know. But I thought there was a Landry's down there.
I think he has a couple restaurants in San Antonio. Yeah, he owns quite a few chains that are here too. So.
Well, earlier this year, I had the pleasure of, because I was involved with a few different events that Graham Weston did around the state for the Texas Business Hall of Fame, and we met another Houstonite, Beaver Applin.
Yes.
The founder of Buc-ee's, who he is a real original character and just made a huge donation to Texas A&M University to create their new school of hospitality. And that's kind of, to me, typical of your Business Hall of Fame profile of the people that are contemporary to my generation. I know Graham Weston gave $15 million to get the data science school started at UTSA here downtown.
Yeah.
Beaver did that. Another person that we interacted with, John Goff, the Fort Worth developer, Dallas. He basically almost single-handedly convinced John Sharp at A&M to buy the law school in Fort Worth, and now that's turning into a full A&M campus, just like the one in San Antonio.
Yeah, no, it's interesting when you look at the super successful, and in this role, it's been sort of an anthropological study on the super successful. Most of them, these men and women are very civic-minded at a very early stage in their life. They care about their community early on, and that kind of drives their business. I think that engagement informs decisions in a way that maybe they don't even realize, that helps them become more successful. And Beaver, Graham, John are all good examples of people who were giving back to their alma maters, people who were giving to other entrepreneurs and less successful business leaders. before they were ever kind of Texas household names. And I just think that's when we interview entrepreneurs for our funding, we always ask about their civic engagement and how they're giving back, not just in terms of resources, but in terms of their time, not because, it's important to do that, which it is. We also think it's a huge indicator of how successful they'll be. So.
There's so many legendary San Antonians that are in there, General McD, Red McCombs,
Jim Leineger,
Tom Frost. I could go on and on. One name that's not in there, Meredith, is Charles Butt. I noticed in 2013, which is before your time, that HEB was inducted as a company. And there's a couple of instances over the course of the Texas Business Hall of Fame's history where companies were inducted. I'm not thinking of the other ones, but I know when I read
Baylor College of Medicine, there's a couple. Yeah.
So how does that work? And how is it that a HEB, which has got such a big footprint in the state, is in, and it's a very philanthropic company. They've always given away, I think, 5% of their pre-tax profits. But Charles himself is not in.
I think in the case of HEB, I think the invitation was to Charles Butt, and he very much wanted it to be an HEB honor. We've since changed our bylaws. We can no longer induct companies.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, there was always, some controversy with that and the kinds of questions you're asking, right? But, the super successful business leader also tends to be very humble, and some of them, wanted their companies to be recognized rather than themselves, which I respect. We also now have stricter rules about living in Texas and residency and things like that you'll look at our list. Like Warren Buffett was inducted in San Antonio, I believe 8 years ago. And we're super proud of that. But how funny is it that was a little bit controversial? I mean, one of his biggest markets is Texas. But in 2024, we can no longer induct a Warren Buffett. You have to have lived here for at least 5 years.
Well, my wife formerly worked for Business Wire, which was a Warren Buffett company, and was charged once with putting together their national meeting here the year that Warren bought him. And so he came, and we had a hamburger and Pepsi with him. That's
how cool.
On the Riverwalk.
Yeah.
That's what he wanted for dinner, was a hamburger and Pepsi. And we had been told ahead of time that's what he'd want for dinner, and that's what he had. So
down to earth guy from everything I've read.
It was a Biga hamburger, so it wasn't just any hamburger.
Yeah.
No, he is down to earth. And I noticed a former boss of mine, San Antonio native Frank Bennick Jr., who went on to run the Hearst Corporation all over the world and build it into what it is. He was inducted, but that was before you changed your... Yeah,
but I do know Frank. And I'm a great admirer of his and his book, and of course I'll draw a blank on his book. It's interesting that book comes up in so many business talks as one of the best business books people have read. And he did an event for us helping promote that book, but I think the world of Frank.
Leave something on the table.
Leave something on the table, exactly.
He's famous for saying that in any negotiation, if the other partner comes out unhappy, it's not been a successful negotiation, that everybody ought to leave feeling like they are participating at a fair level, which is that's not the usual sort of predatory, let's see if I can win or surmount my adversary or whatever, that he's always looked for business partners where the relationship is mutually supportive and agreeable.
Well, really successful people like other people winning. I mean, that's a whole probably different subject, but that's interesting that you point that out. That doesn't surprise me.
I want to ask you, going back to your process, I can see that you've modernized things with bylaws changes and so forth. So we know that only the 120 living former members of the Hall of Fame get to vote on the ballot.
Yeah.
I'd be very curious to see those ballots before and who didn't get in, but who gets to nominate?
Anyone can nominate. We just, again, we discourage PR firms from nominating. Some of our best nominations come from the people we funded because they really have a pulse on what's happening, on who's speaking at entrepreneurial things. I would say 2 of our inductees this year came from, very early stage entrepreneurs we have funded. Joe Gebbia, the co-founder of Airbnb.
From Austin.
Mm-hmm. And Kathleen Hildreth, who's out of Denton, Texas, but the only veteran, I believe, to ever make Forbes' wealthiest self-made list.
And tell me about those 2 individuals. And let's talk a little bit about the Texas Business Hall of Fame's program, where you do reach out to young entrepreneurs.
Uh-huh.
And you have incentive programs to help them and to mentor them.
We do. So every year we fund up to 40 entrepreneurs around the state. We used to only fund in the higher education community. Now we fund in the veteran entrepreneurial community. Those are usually mid-stage entrepreneurs. And then in the higher ed space, it's usually early stage. And we also fund in the high school space, just a couple. And then we have some statewide awards. And those awards range anywhere from $15,000 to $20,000. Some of these people are at points in their trajectory that they don't actually need that money, but it's recognition of what they've done and where we think they'll go. And, with that funding also comes a very exclusive network, and a network eager to help them. That's our whole goal, is to bridge servant-minded entrepreneurs with the entrepreneurs that we recognize on our stage every year, in hopes that when they get to that level, they too will be business leaders that care about their community and give back.
Well, how does one pursue one of those grants? Because here we are in Geekdom, in the Rand building. It's filled with people that aspire to start a company or have started a company or are working to do that. And they would never say no to any opportunity to seek funding. So are they eligible? They have to. Can they go to the website and read about the eligibility to see whether or not they might qualify?
You can read about the eligibility at texasbusiness.org. I would say, in general, you have to be part of one of the areas I mentioned. Like, you have to be nominated by a high school, or you have to be nominated by an institution of higher learning where you're currently studying. In the veteran entrepreneurial space, anyone can apply.
Now, given the fact that most of your inductees have nothing to do in their business background with education, or with most of them aren't veterans, probably. Why are you
Actually, we have quite a few.
Do you? But why are you focusing on those two areas and not saying we're supporting the smartest tech startups like Airbnb or whatever when they're at their very nascent stage? Well,
I think at some point we tried dipping our toe in the water in terms of identifying just the rock star entrepreneur in general. Like, for example, the Rice Business Competition is the biggest pitch competition, I think, in the world of its kind. We were a funder for the top finishing Texas team, a $25,000 prize for some time. But what we learned is that pitch competitions are not the best place to find these entrepreneurs. So really, it's a matter of finding out how to identify these people in a systematic way, reach out to them, solicit applications. So, any ideas, we're open to them.
The money is obviously important to all of these recipients, but I think the access to the Hall of Fame members is even more important. I recently attended an event that you organized here, showcasing Graham Weston again, talking to Holly Thagard, the founder of Supergoop.
Yeah, she's amazing.
And I don't think most people even know she lives in San Antonio. I did not until shortly before that event. And what a powerhouse company she's built. A former school teacher, a harpist, harp player, made her living, Holly the harpist. But she decided that, she could build a better sunblock, and that launched her into a whole line of skincare products, protection products that's just taken off and is huge. And the audience were all these grant recipients that you assemble, and they're just young, bright, and people that were also interacting with some, billionaires and other Hall of Fame members that they had access to because of their grant.
Yeah, and that, our events you've been to enough of them to know they're usually pretty small, because we really like the audience to be engaged, and there to be real opportunity for conversation and learning and relationship building. So, we are looking for more partnerships in the community. For so long, our organization was very inward facing. It was a very, very tight network. Our events were only for Texas Business Hall of Fame members and directors, and a few alumni. We have been partnering with more groups and communities. We partnered with SMU on something this year. We partnered with the ION at Rice. the Rice Business Alliance this year for the Beaver Upland, the founder of Buc-ee's, as you mentioned earlier, event. So we're trying to bring some of our programming more to the general public, if for no other reason that expose them to new avenues to become involved with the Texas Business Hall of Fame and become engaged. But right now, it's still a very, very tight group. So,
well, my interest in it is anything that promotes significant philanthropy is worth exploring from my point of view as a journalist. And that's one of the things that interested me, that just becoming a billionaire alone does not let you walk into the Texas Business Hall of Fame. There has to be something more. And I have to ask you, I'm watching with interest how hard Texas is trying to recruit from California, which is such a seedbed of innovation with the Silicon Valley, but just California in general. Its university system is second to none, and it's always been a place where things get started and then move east. And because of the political environment, however, people are second-guessing that, and you have more and more companies looking to states that don't have an income tax, that have a very pronounced deregulatory business environment that sort of defines Texas. And so you have the Elon Musks of the world decamping from their California bases to here. And he in particular is of interest because he built a gigafactory in Austin. He's building one in Monterey. We're getting some suppliers here in San Antonio. He tried to interest our city in his boring company, tunnel initiative to do something from the airport. Have you identified anybody that moved here from California or moved their company or their corporate headquarters, or it doesn't have to be California, from outside the state into the state that's gathered, your attention? I mean, you're certainly hyper aware of Elon Musk's presence here, from SpaceX in Brownsville to I guess he's living in Austin. I'm not sure about that.
He is, and there's a mass influx of especially like kind of the tech titans into Austin, and you can already see them sort of having their impact on the Austin landscape. I'm hoping that sort of extends outside Austin. And Dallas, of course, I think is really experiencing a boom with so many corporate, I think City relocated there, some others. Like Texas is the most business-friendly state in the country. And kind of tying that in with philanthropy, I think now is a real moment for our state. I mean, we're one of the wealthiest states in the country. We're also one of the least philanthropic. And
really?
That's one reason I took this job, because there's nothing more powerful than a story. There's nothing more powerful than an example. And it inspires people when they see someone giving back and what they've gained from giving back. It really influences, the business leaders that attend our events and are engaged with our organization, people that can be reaching further and that have huge potential to have an impact in their community that perhaps has been unrecognized. If you look at the 20 most philanthropic people in the United States, only 2 of them are Texans. Michael Dell, one of our Hall of Fame members, and John Arnold out of Houston, another Hall of Fame member who, before Mark Zuckerberg, was the youngest billionaire in the United States, who retired at 37 to dedicate his entire life to philanthropy.
Where does one find measurements of how states stack up philanthropically? I'd love to look at that myself. And
usually the Chronicle of Philanthropy is a really good resource for looking at stuff like that. I think the last time I looked, Texas might have been in the 30s.
Is that because it's a younger state, or its wealth is younger, or is there any reason that one can point to?
Well, there's no way to come up with an objective number, because Texans also tend to be very individual in their philanthropy, meaning they're less likely to publicize it. They often give to other individuals. That's their way of helping. There's no way to make record of that, nor would anyone want to, because, why would you want to tell the whole world you're helping someone out, right? So sometimes, you have to look at that number and make some adjustments for sort of Texas's culture. But still, it is very obvious that we could be doing a lot more. So,
one extraordinarily philanthropic inductee who died earlier this year was San Antonio's Carlos Alvarez, who was actually a Mexican native and citizen originally, who came here as a beer importer And we are now the largest trading partner with Mexico, the United States. Mexico's our largest trading partner. Texas is number one in terms of both exports and imports coming from that country. Now, Carlos and his wife, Malou, they relocated here many years ago, and they became, Texans and Americans. But I just wonder whether or not the impact of the Mexican economy opening and the amount of business between Mexico and Texas, whether or not other Mexican business people have been on your radar.
Yes, so we inducted a Mexican-American last year, Daniel Levetsky, the founder of Kind Bars.
Right. He's a Trinity University grad.
He's a Trinity University grad. And I think, he's also having a huge moment, not just because of Kind, because he's been since the very beginning of his success, has just been such an instrumental player in bridge building, especially in the Middle East, in terms of divisiveness, political divisiveness. He's now taken that cause to the United States. He has a Builders Texas now, too, I believe. He's also just replaced, I think, Mark Cuban on Shark Tank.
That's right.
Yeah, Mark Cuban's another inductee, but Daniel, I think, if I read that correctly, I think he's going to be now a regular on Shark Tank. I think he's just been a guest in the past. But yeah, another Mexican-American. We have several.
Does he live in Texas, though?
Yes, he does. He lives in Austin.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah. And he'll actually be at the event this year. He's introducing Joe Gebbia, the co-founder of Airbnb, who relocated to Austin recently, 5 years ago.
From California, right?
Yeah, from California. He's from Atlanta, but yeah.
But he's an example of somebody.
He built Airbnb out in California, yeah.
But Airbnb stayed in California, did it not? Mm-hmm. Is he no longer connected to it, or is he just an absentee founder?
He no longer has a formal connection to Airbnb, I believe. I could be wrong on that. I mean, he's no longer managing Airbnb. Now his big initiative is Samara, which is building tiny homes.
I want to go back to Elon Musk and ask you whether or not he has made the ballot yet, or whether he has not been philanthropic in Texas in a way that would get him on the ballot, and whether or not your process of anybody can nominate anyone, but only your members can decide who gets in. But during that nomination process, I would assume that you're subjected to intense lobbying from people that you should be promoting certain people getting in or certain people not getting in.
Yeah.
How about that part of your job?
Are you being specific to Elon?
Well, I might as well be if you'd like to be.
Well, Elon, of course, has come up a number of times. He's just hit the mark for being here long enough.
Oh, what is the mark?
It's 5 years. We make allowances a little here and there.
I was going to say, I could challenge that.
Yeah. But he, Elon's philanthropy is supposedly huge. I mean, he's if you research it, he talks about it. But what you don't know is where the philanthropy is. And that doesn't always matter to us. We just want to see clear evidence that it's not, a lot of things can count as philanthropy that might not be to the average bear. But I mean, he obviously has been transformational in terms of not just, through Tesla, but through, what he's done to Brownsville. I mean, some might argue there's some negative to that, but there's a lot of positive too. And, we look at that too. That's an important part of our metrics when we're evaluating for our ballot is what have they done to change the economic opportunity of the state? And between Jeff Bezos, who's also Texan, by the way, at least he went to school in Houston early
Has
years.
a big ranch out in West Texas.
Yeah. I mean, their space programs, Texas is the hub for that. I mean, NASA was, but for the private space exploration,
How do you assess the negative sides, though? Elon Musk's SpaceX has been a terrible environmental citizen down in Boca Chica, which is a part of the country I used to live in, and I watch closely, and I've been down there, and it's amazing the job creation that's occurred, and he's been generous to the local communities, but also very controversial about his indifference to what's happened to the wetlands. And you look at what he's doing now with giving us $1 million away to people that basically are Trump voters. They're all Trump voters. He's giving hundreds of millions of dollars to the political campaigns. And X, frankly, has become the primary social media platform for disinformation in the country. So how do you weigh those pros and cons in deciding somebody ought to get in or not get in?
Well, that's not up to me, thankfully. That's up to a committee.
There's a passing the buck if
It's
I've
up
ever
to a
heard one.
committee and up to our Hall of Fame members. I think that, I will say it is very hard in my experience to reach a level like that without controversy.
Yeah, look at Jeff Bezos and the decision that he unilaterally stopped the Washington Post from endorsing Kamala Harris last week or 2 weeks ago.
I saw that.
They've lost 250,000 subscribers, apparently, as a result of that, that's not good for democracy.
Yeah. Well, there's a price for genius, maybe. I don't know. Not everyone's perfect. And I think that how people use their influence is something we look at. And I'll just, I'll leave it at that. But I think that as controversial as someone like Elon Musk is or Jeff Bezos, they pioneered a completely different way of doing things, and they pioneered completely new industries.
And yet we're talking about two people that aren't in the Texas Business Hall of Fame.
They're not. Well, Jeff Bezos, I don't know if he spends the majority of his time in Texas.
He lives in Miami.
Yeah. So, he does spend, I think, quite a bit of time.
You have to live here now or have your residence here? Is that part of your bylaws?
Yeah.
Well, so that would exclude him. He's a Miami resident.
But
now.
Elon Musk would not be excluded at this point. And, I just think that he's never been up for consideration until recently just because he hadn't been here for very long.
Well, you won't get any pushback on David Robinson. I can promise you that. And he's going to be surrounded by people that are delighted to meet him.
Yeah.
Even if they don't know the full story about Admiral Capital and his creation of the Carver Academy here on the East Side, which was an incredible gesture early on in his career, and has really proved to be one of the first and most enduring charter schools in the city.
Yeah.
So we're happy to see him in. It'll be fun to hear Roger Staubach pass the baton from one Naval Academy graduate to the next, and it will be interesting to hear what David's message will be. Do each of those inductees speak at the gala?
Yes, they give an acceptance speech, and no doubt David's will be, incredibly humble. And but I'm looking forward to what he has to say. I've just watched his an event documentary, and it was pretty incredible. His dad had so much influence on his life, and I'm sure he'll talk about that. It brought tears to my eyes. David Robinson, I would say, is about as controversy-free as you can get in terms of a Texas Business Hall of Fame inductee. So
I think so, and that's a good place to end the conversation. So thanks so much for coming all the way from Houston, Meredith Walker.
Well, thanks for having me.
And we're glad to help you elevate the profile of the Texas Business Hall of Fame, especially when you're picking great San Antonians to enter.
Yeah, no, well, I hopefully, there's a few tickets left for the event. I don't know when this will run, but we also post a video of it online. So if anyone wants to watch David's speech, it should be an incredible one.
Well, this will post Friday, November 8th, and we will promote it and hope that the Business Hall of Fame uses its social media reach to do the same thing. And in advance of your gala next week in Dallas, maybe we'll get a lot of your voting members to listen to.
Okay, great. Well, we will do that.
Thank you, Meredith.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.